I think I just witnessed one of the worst storytelling misses I have seen in a very, very long time. Hi, I'm Charles of SirBookSage, and let's talk about this staggeringly bizarre, shocking miss. Okay, I'm talking, of course, it's probably not a surprise to you, about the Rings of Power, Episode 6, Udun. Now, this is not a review of the episode itself as a whole. I'm going to do a whole separate video on that. This is about a moment that should have happened in this episode, that they even did the legwork to set up in this episode, but didn't give us this moment in the episode, which is just really bizarre. We have what should have been one of the most anticipated moments and one of the biggest highlights of season 1 of this show that should have taken place in episode 6. However, the showrunners apparently completely missed this moment, but I will explain. Now, in order to do this, I have to kind of first lay out the geographical construct of Mordor, because it ties directly in to what they forgot to show. Mordor is bordered on 3 sides by mountains, on the north, the west, and the south. There are only 3 ways to get into Mordor from Western Middle-earth. The first way is to go all the way around to the end of the mountain range that runs east and west, and then come back down and make your way all the way back west into Mordor proper. Ain't nobody got time for that. So for the people in Middle-earth, there's 2 main ways to get in. The first one ties into the name of the episode, Udun. And you see the orcs chanting, Udun, 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 in this episode as Mount Doom is being kind of woken up and erupting. Now, the show gives you no context for why the episode's called Udun, gives you no context for why the orcs are chanting Udun as Mount Doom wakes up. However, Udun is a particular place in Middle-earth, and in particular, a place in Mordor itself. If you look at that map and you see the mountains going around, in this top northwest corner of Mordor, there's this little sort of piece of land. It's almost encircled by mountains in this top corner by itself. And that is known as the Valley of Udun. In the books, when Sauron comes to Mordor and begins building Barad-dûr and sets up shop, the Valley of Udun becomes kind of the primary home of the orcs in Mordor. A lot of the forges that are built for them to forge all their weapons of war are in Udun. And while the orcs might be sent out on missions and might be stationed at all different places, they probably would view Udun as a home if they have such a home concept. So I kind of got the impression that the orcs were chanting Udun because in Mount Doom's eruption, you could kind of view it as that little northwestern corner of Mordor, like the land is being reshaped by Mount Doom's eruption, and it's kind of like reshaping it into a more orc habitable valley. So that's kind of my impression I got on why the episode's called Udun and why the orcs are chanting Udun. Even though, again, in the show, the episode itself, they give you no context to this. I imagine they probably will at some point. Now, the reason I bring up Udun is because when you look at the map, you have these mountains that run from east to west. You have the Ethel Duath that runs north and south on the western border of Mordor. Now, where they come together, they don't actually meet. There's an opening, there's a gap there, right above the Valley of Udun. And it's that gap is one of the 2 entrances from the west into Mordor. And that, I believe, is where Sauron later constructs and builds the Black Gate to close off that gap. So in The Return of the King, when Aragorn leads the men of the West out to go march to the Black Gates to make their final stand, in the hopes that that'll take Sauron's attention away from his own land and put his eye on them and give Frodo enough time to perhaps succeed. It's just on the other side of the Black Gate is the Valley of Udun. That's where all the orcs gather and march through to come out of the Black Gate. And the reason I'm bringing this up is because, again, this is one of the 2 main entrance points into Mordor. But it's the other entrance to Mordor south of this that's much more relevant to this what they missed in this episode. That entrance is relevant to the orcs chanting Udun and everything. But it's the second entrance. If you come down here, down the Ethel Duath Mountains, about halfway down, there's a gap. In the Third Age, this is the Morgul Vale. This is where Minas Morgul, the fortress, is. The Tower of Cirith Ungol, where the leader of the ring race, the Witch King, this is his abode. Gollum takes Frodo and Sam like up the stairwell, and they sort of navigate across the this opening passage. They can't just travel through it because the fortress is there. All the enemies of the armies of Sauron are there. They'll get captured. But at this point in the Second Age, it's an opening. We don't know if there's anything built there. If you look at just the map and you know the geographical layout and that this gap is there, that's the most logical place the Galadriel and Númenóreans are going to come through to enter Mordor. And in the episode, on the ship, when they're sailing and they're nearing Middle-earth, there's a scene with Elendil and Miriel, the Queen Regent, and they're looking at the map of Middle-earth. And Elendil is explaining that once they arrive, they come into this bay, it's going to be an entire day's journey sailing the boats up the river to a point where they can disembark. And then another entire day's journey on horseback to go from the river into Mordor and down to the Tower of Tirith. Because if you look at the map of Mordor, halfway down, just south of the gap, this sort of the Morgul Vale, there's a little bit of mountain juts sticking eastward. And that's where the Tower of Tirith is built. And just to the north of that is where the town of Tir Harad is, which is why on their way to the Tower of Tirith, they end up passing through Tir Harad and stumble upon the battle and arrive in the nick of time to save the people and yada, 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 all that stuff. We see this scene, and then we don't see the Númenóreans until they arrive on horseback in Tir Harad. Did you catch the scene that the show left out? A really, really important scene. Now, on its surface, it might not seem a big deal, but for the journey of one of these particular characters, a massively important moment in their own journey. A moment they don't realize is important yet, but just those who study, following this story as a whole, and in the context of mythology and everything, a massively critical moment. If you look at the map, you'll see that the Númenóreans would sail up the river until they come to where they can basically kind of see the gap, the opening in the mountain range. And that's where they would come ashore. And which means they would stop and come ashore in about the spot that Isildur later builds the city of Osgiliath. This is generally where they're going to stop. And then they come through the mountain pass, which is later becomes the Morgul Vale, but is where Isildur builds Minas Ithil, which is the seat of his castle, his fortress, his city, where he sits on his throne. And Minas Arnor is built where his brother Anarion sits on his throne, which Minas Arnor later becomes renamed Minas Tirith after the fall of Minas Ithil, and its renaming is the Morgul Vale. So here we have Isildur, the man who becomes a future king. We have him sailing up this river and setting foot at the heart of what will be his kingdom. And the show doesn't even think to give us that scene. And they set the scene up in the episode, showing us the map and literally, hey viewers, see this? The map goes up here. Do you remember what's here on the map in the Third Age? I mean, how do you set this scene up and then not show it to us? How do you have Isildur looking upon the land that will become his kingdom for the very first time and not show us this moment? What is this show? Who are these showrunners? What is even happening in this show? How do you miss this? How do you miss this moment? I mean, imagine if you're a Game of Thrones fan, imagine if they just skipped Daenerys actually arriving in Westeros at the beginning of season 7. Imagine if they just skipped that part. And then the next time you see her getting on the ships leaving Marine, and then the next time you see her, she's already set up shop in Dragonstone. Imagine not showing us the moment she steps onto Westerosi soil for the first time. Now, this isn't the exact equivalent of that, but this is the first step in Isildur's journey. Here, we've had 3 episodes of him being a moron, right? This moment where he arrives at what will later become his kingdom, this is where his story begins. This is where his journey begins right here in this moment. They should, since this is, a mythological story, it would make sense for Isildur to almost something in him to kind of respond to the sight of this land, like something to awaken in him for his first step into becoming a man and eventually a king, like begins in this moment. Like this is it right here. And don't you think watching Bronwyn suffer 10 minutes with an arrow wound is far more compelling storytelling than seeing a future king looking upon what becomes the heart of his future kingdom? Like, how do you not show this? This isn't masterclass storytelling. This is like basic storytelling 101. This is something that even a 12-year-old would understand. This is a scene you show. How do you not do this? I don't understand what the show is doing. Like, how do you not show this? How do you leave this out? And they did the legwork in the show to set the scene up. It's mind-boggling. I don't understand what's happening here. I don't get it. It's like, is there a person alive on planet Earth who can explain to me why in the world they wouldn't show Isildur arriving at this place, even though it means nothing to Isildur yet? And for those of you who don't know anything about the story, it means nothing to you yet, but it will mean something to you by the time this story is done. You'll look back and remember this moment. If it was actually there in the episode, you'll remember this later. Wow, that's the moment he's first stepped foot on what becomes his kingdom later. I mean, that's a massively significant moment in the journey of a character in a story. Like, let's take Dune. For those who may not have read the books here, I've read the first 4, the first 2 multiple times, many, many times, but I'm going to do another reread next year and finally read the last 2 to finish it off. But if you've seen just the movie, right, the part 1 ends with his basically his knife fight with Jaime's. Now, that might look like, to some people, maybe it seems like an insignificant thing. Like, okay, bad Paul getting to kill somebody for the first time, a nice little building moment. But and I think the movie does a good job of showing that this is actually a massively significant moment. And basically, the fate of the universe is resting on the outcome of this fight, because it's not set. There's this thing called the Golden Road that Paul kind of sees like the path of the future laid out that comes later. But that path isn't set yet. And in the story, like the universe is like holding its breath in this moment with this fight, waiting the outcome. Because Paul could lose and be killed. And then he just goes into the dustbin of history. And all this, like who knows how many generations and generations and generations of work by the Bene Gesserit falls to dust, or he wins, and this sort of the whole universe becomes changed forever by the events that follow this. So imagine like the show, like somebody not understanding this story, like showrunner or movie runner not understanding the scene and said, you know what, it's a little knife fight. What's the big deal? We got get to the writing the sandworms. I mean, that's what we should be doing here. Why are you wasting your time? Paul, imagine it's going to kill a lot of people. Like, skip this thing and get to the sandworms. Like, that would be the stupidity level, which thankfully they didn't do in the Dune movie, and people understand its significance. Now, this Isildur doesn't come to Middle Earth here at this point the way the show is doing it in the actual books, but this is the way the show is doing it. So this is Isildur's moment. This is the moment where he begins his journey as a man, his journey into destiny. He should feel the pull of destiny in this moment when he steps on that land for the first time. Because again, this is a mythology. It's going to have those kinds of moments will happen in this kind of a story where you'll feel the weight of destiny tugging at you. And didn't even think. Apparently they didn't. Did they not even think that it was important to show? I don't understand. But maybe when they're going back to the ships and he's getting back on and they're going to be sailing back down the river, maybe he'll go and turn around and go, our house would look good right there. What do you think, Dad? Which is kind of like, just, no, that's not how you do it. This was your moment. This show, this was the man's beginning, his first step into his destiny. and they didn't even think to show it. I don't understand what the show is. So up here on the screen, you'll find videos, probably a Rings of Power playlist, among other things. And I will see you soon. Welcome to all my new subscribers. I am Charles, SirBookSage. Happy reading.